Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, October 18th, 2016, live show, unless you're listening in the future and this is a podcast that we use. You never know when that's going to happen, but I don't anticipate it. Usually on any given October 17th or 18th, if it's not a weekend, we'll be on, but who knows? I think I've jinxed myself now, so probably around, make sure to get a flu shot next fall. And avoid, I think I'm foretelling being stricken by the flu on October 18th, 2017. Amazing developments here on this morning's Kagro in the Morning Show. We are live now, as Bill reminds us, all the way from Portland, Maine, with 3 weeks till Election Day. Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman, is reduced to incoherent babble, as we all are, and you hear it before you as we speak. In fact, because I speak. All right, plenty to catch up on today, as usual. We've got backstory. We've got morning crazy. We've got weird stories from all over the place. We've got contributions from listeners all over the United States, but particularly concentrated in, let's say, Texas and Michigan at the moment. And then, of course, contributors from outside the United States as well. Let's see. Melania Trump was on TV last night. Guess whether or not I watched that. She was on TV defending, I guess, or trying to offer up some kind of a defense of Donald Trump's so-called locker room banter. Best I can make out, she says that it was he was talking like a teenager, hanging out with Billy Bush. This despite the fact that he was 60 years old at the time. But okay, you know, he's as young as he feels. But an interesting point made this morning. Adam Serwer, as a matter of fact, making this point. Trump, he's, superimposing two of his more controversial statements, one atop the other. Trump insists that the Central Park Five are guilty because they offered up a confession at first. But now, of course, his wife is insisting that he's the one who made a false confession to Billy Bush. He was induced to do so by Billy Bush's locker room talk. Well, and then, of course, we've also observed that, Billy Bush, the idea that he could not withstand, that Donald Trump couldn't withstand his teenage wiles, I guess. The idea that he would be able to stand up and defeat ISIS or stand up to Vladimir Putin when Billy Bush can talk him into just about anything. I don't really know. I recirculated last night the video of Billy Bush taking Donald Trump out to vote in November of 2004. This before they went on their famous excursion to the set of, was it Days of Our Lives? Whatever soap opera managed to get Donald Trump to agree to come on the air. Can you imagine how difficult that was? It's a camera. Would you like to come on? Gee whiz. I don't know. Anyway, the year before, he had taken Donald Trump out to vote. I wonder about what kind of relationship did these guys have? That's actually an interesting question now. I have not yet seen that one addressed. I mean, he's the cousin of George W. Bush, nephew of George H.W. Bush, and just, I don't know. I mean, he's the right kind of person to find himself, I guess, hanging out with the Trumps. That, you know, Donald Trump is a bit of a star effer, and he'll go with any name, I guess, that he can get, even if it's Billy Bush. But, I guess also as an entertainment reporter, I could see that perhaps for no particular reason, Billy Bush is put on the Trump beat. He's just a personable, rich guy, I guess, and they thought that would work for Donald Trump. But an interesting look, once again, at the voting situation. I guess people with keener eyes for it have been staring at the video over and over again and pointing out One of the things that, of course, struck me was that he has to visit, I think, 3 polling places before he finally gives up and takes a provisional ballot. I don't think he ever found out which precinct he was actually registered in. I assume he's had more luck since then, but I don't know why. That's giving him the benefit of the doubt, I guess. I mean, his kids never figured out how to register to vote, so I don't know whether he ever did. But somebody else pointed out, he takes the provisional ballot, or what looks to be a provisional ballot. I don't know how things work there in New York, but he looks to have taken a provisional ballot with him out of the polling place, which others assert is illegal in itself. So we've videotaped some voter fraud, I guess, and it's Billy Bush at the heart of it. Once again, I would say stay away from Billy Bush if you're Donald Trump. This guy is bad news for Donald Trump, but I guess oddly good news for the rest of the country. Meanwhile, I believe he is fired at the Today Show. That's the thanks he gets for saving our country by being a dopey frat boy. Darn it. I don't know. Well, I guess he didn't have much of a career ahead of him with that anyway, but maybe he'll land back on an Access Hollywood or Entertainment Tonight type show. Seems to be about his speed. Greg Dworkin is with us with a raft of stories, as usual, calling in from Connecticut. Good morning, Greg.
Hey, good morning. How are you? I'm sending pictures as well.
Oh.
I got a whole bunch of stuff here today to talk about, but, we were playing a little bit online yesterday. This is going to be at the very, very bottom of your Twitter feed, if I can actually get it done. So just give me 1 minute here. We were playing with cartoons.
Oh.
And one of the fun things to do with cartoons always is Family Circus.
Well, when you change them.
Yeah, when you change them. So we were doing exactly that yesterday.
All right.
So it was really kind of fun. And I have a picture here I'm just trying to locate so I can send it to you. There it is. It's Family Circus, and of course the mom is sweeping the floor from broken material.
Of course, because gender roles.
Yep. And I guess pointing at Jeffy and saying, Donald, that's a horrible thing to say. And, of course, the little I don't know ghost that always goes by, or who me was going by, and we put Billy Bush there. And he's pointing over there and said, Billy Bush, he made me do it. He egged me on.
Well, you could do, there's so much you could do with Family Circus. Billy, age 6, takes Donald Trump to the set of Days of Our Lives, and he goes around.
I always blame Billy. The part about it that's just so silly is you're talking about the alpha male of the country.
Yes.
And then Melania comes on and says, he's really just a little boy.
Yep, pretty much. That's the way it is with a lot of people who call themselves alpha males. But, yeah, it's a terrible irony. We can't seem to do anything about it. We'll just observe how ironic it is.
Right. And does it make any difference? And the answer is no, actually, it does not. So let's go back up to the top here. We have top of our feed that I was sending you. Lots of new polls out. But one of the more interesting commentary comes from NBC News. This is actually back at the bottom again. The 2016 race has been amazingly stable. This is a piece by Chuck Dodd, Mark Murray, and Carrie Dan. And if you've been listening to the show for a long time, you will hear things that you've heard before.
Okay.
So here we are 3 weeks away. And let's look at NBC Wall Street Journal numbers from January 2016, right before Iowa and New Hampshire, and look at them now. Trump's favorable, unfavorable rating in January 2016, 29 positive, 58 negative. And now, 29 positive, 62 negative.
Oh.
No change. Clinton's favorable, unfavorable, 40% positive, 49 negative, and now 40% positive, 50% negative.
Okay.
From January 2016 till now. And the two-way ballot in January 2016, Clinton 51, Trump 41. And today, Clinton 51, Trump 41.
This seems, it does seem like we have heard it before, doesn't it?
And somebody said, well, but, you're missing all the ups and downs and ups and downs. And my comment to that is, think of it like you're taking a trip on an airplane. Sure, there's been turbulence on the flight, but where you took off from and where you landed have never varied.
That's true. Relativity, I hate you.
You know. So, you've heard this before. We said this many times on the show. You know, what's going on with the election? Where's the inflection point? Well, actually, it was won over the summer. And it was clinched with the conventions. Everything that's happened since then, especially the debates, but all of the revelations, really haven't made that much difference in the sense that Trump was losing before, and he's losing now. Sure, the Billy Bush tapes matter a lot. They just took away his ability to recover. But they didn't really change the outcome of the election. And part of the reason for that is that if you're a Republican and you hear those tapes, you go, look, I already know he's a jerk, but he's a placeholder. I'm mad at the world. I don't like the current situation. I'm voting against Washington. I will vote for whoever is in that slot. I don't really care who it is.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you found more things bad about the guy who I don't really care about? So what? That's not why I'm voting for. So that's why none of the revelations really matter. Now, Rick Wilson thinks there's at least one more really bad thing coming out against Trump between now and the election day. One oppo dump. At least one oppo dump, and he says, and it's really bad. Worse than anything else.
Is it threats of curb stomping?
Doesn't say.
Oh, because I saw that over the weekend, too. Well, actually, it was...
Definitions, right?
Well, it was Rick Wilson making it. That's what I found that fascinating. Somebody actually did some excellent work digging up the past deplorable statements of never Trumpers or people who have ended up as never Trumpers and are attempting to distance themselves from it and pointing out, once again, gee whiz, how did we get here where he's calling for violence or undermining the integrity of the election? This is a criticism leveled by people who, in Rick Wilson's case, very famously called for the curb stomping of the staff of Media Matters. And then, of course, the definition being knocking people out and putting their teeth against the curb and stomping on the back of their heads.
And to make sure they lose their teeth.
Yeah. So he's a sweetheart. Now.
Right. Well, partisans.
Yeah.
Right. And it's really quite funny because of all the different people on Twitter and online, there's actually been a pretty good alliance between the progressives and the never-Trumpers, some of whom in their previous life have been pretty mean partisans.
Yes. Not
particularly liking progressives. And after the election, I'm sure we'll go back to our usual corners, but for now, it's certainly a marriage of convenience. It's an alliance of convenience. And a good one to have. And, in the process, in terms of talking to each other during this Romulan neutral zone period in American politics,
yes.
Maybe something decent will come out of it. A little more dialogue, a little more understanding of the other side, a little more interest in actual governance, trading, horse trading, the kind of things that actually used to happen in Washington when stuff got passed. None of it is pure. All of it is practical. Who knows? Could happen.
You never know. At the very least, you could come away saying, I probably ought not to threaten such things anymore.
Well, at least not to somebody I know.
Right. Or somebody who might be watching.
But, if you know them, they're less likely to do that. Or at least you get to call them out on it and say, what are you doing? You know me. I was talking to you for the last 2 months. What are you doing? So, those sorts of things matter. And, it's a truism of the race that Trump voters live in a different world than Bernie voters who live in a different world than Clinton voters. And they don't always know each other and so on and so forth. But this is actually part of trying to get to know each other. Nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
Anyway, that's the optimistic Pollyanna view of America, which I always have. The reason that we still stay in politics isn't because it's just so incredibly nasty that it'll never change. Chances are the 1860 election was a lot worse than this one.
Yes. Well, we'll see.
Certainly the advertising and the media were. If you ever go to one of those museums and check out some of Lincoln's elections, they didn't say nice things about him.
No. And now, Penny.
And now, he's a wonderful guy that everybody loves.
Well, Martin Luther King, too.
Yeah, those sorts of things. So what do we got in the polls? So let's start with this NBC Survey Monkey poll we have this morning. It's Tuesday, and every Tuesday they give us that.
I see.
After a bruising week for Donald Trump, of course, every week is a bruising week for Donald Trump from now on, amid backlash from the release of a lewd 2005 recording and infighting among GOP party leaders, Hillary Clinton now holds a 6-point lead over the Republican nominee, according to the latest NBC News Survey Monkey Weekly election tracking poll. Four-way matchup, it's a 6-point lead with Johnson holding on to 8% support. I think that'll change over time. Jill Stein is 4. And if we have a two-way race, she leads by 8, with majority support of 51 to 43. So there's a lot of polls now showing her getting at or close to 50%, and that's important. I mean, basically the race is over. We know that. And you could argue it's been over for a long time based on the previous discussion about the stable race. But what matters now is the margin. And I think we're still seeing a discrepancy between the online polls, which tend to be a little more Trump favorable, and the live caller polls, which tend to be a little more Clinton favorable and are starting to hit double digits. But as we talked about the other day, a solid 8-point lead means that you're going to get polls between 2-point lead for Clinton and 14-point lead for Clinton and everything in between. So that's exactly what we're seeing, and this is no surprise in that particular regard. We talked, I think, a little bit about the GWU battleground poll and the ABC and the Washington Post and the NBC Wall Street Journal poll. There's a new, not a battleground, which we talked about, but an actual CBS poll. Clinton lead over Trump widens with 3 weeks to go. This one has Clinton at 47, Trump at 38. And I think one of the things that you'll start seeing when you look at the polls is look to see how close Trump is to 40. Look to see how close Clinton is to 50. And you'll see a lot of that. 2 weeks ago, Clinton's lead was 4 points, and now it's 9. And that's what's been happening. The results of the Billy Bush tape and the disgruntlement among especially women is remarkable, and it takes a while. You don't see it like 2 days, 3 days, 4 days after this. It just has to percolate down, and people have to think about it and talk about it. And, of course, we had the big Monmouth poll that came out with Trump down by 12. Newer polls are out this morning, but they're kind of like niche polls, and they're kind of sort of interesting.
Okay.
For example, Cosmopolitan is looking at only women and their readers. A new survey of Cosmopolitan women finds 83% of respondents believe Hillary Clinton will be the next president of the United States. And Clinton's support is matched by strong favorability numbers that have risen since the last survey in June. 63% of Cosmopolitan readers say they have a favorable view of Clinton, a 10-point bump since June, and Trump's favorability is at 20%.
Okay. Well, not terribly
so from
surprising.
53 to 63 favorable for Clinton, 46 unfavorable is now 37, so that's good. Whereas Trump went from favorable 21 to 20, and his unfavorable went from 79 to 80. And this is why, when you look at some questions like, did that tape change your mind about Trump? No. We already didn't like him.
That seems true.
So you're not going to see that. Now, this particular Cosmopolitan survey was run by John Della Volpe, of the director of the Harvard Institute of Politics, and he looks at millennial polling specifically. And so this is just snippets of the poll. I don't have the top lines. And
What, are you too lazy to read them all?
Can't find
You
them.
millennial? All right.
But, when we get them, I think they'll be kind of interesting. And, for example, which candidate will best deal with the following issues? Clinton leads 61-28 on the economy, 65-23 on health care, 63-25 on national security. These people don't particularly like Trump. Remember, it's women only and tends to be younger women. Tax policy, 63-26, reproductive rights, 77-11. Wage gap, 78-9, immigration reform, 70-24, on every single issue. And the interesting part is that as you look at the poll as it develops, 18 to 24-year-olds tended to support Sanders, and older millennial women, 25 to 34, tended to support Clinton. But today, compared to the last time they did the poll back in February, younger and older millennial readers are equally likely to say they're voting for Clinton. Della Volpe was on Morning Joe this morning talking about the poll a little bit. Bottom line here is that Clinton is, in fact, consolidating her support with millennials. It's just that it's taking a long time and probably will reach fruition, by Election Day, which is exactly where it should be.
Yeah, he's going to have a hard end date on that.
Yeah. Also, separately, USA Today Rock the Vote poll finds Clinton support among millennial grows. Young voters conducted by Ipsos finds Hillary Clinton is continuing to build a lead over Donald Trump among millennials. For Republican Donald Trump, all the news in the survey is bad. Only 1 in 5 likely voters under 35 support him, the lowest in modern times. That's pretty impressive. Even a third of self-identified Republicans don't support him. It is not unusual for the millennial vote to split evenly between Republicans and Democrats in a campaign, in a presidential campaign, looking back historically. But this is very solidly toward the Democrat in this particular case. Among the key findings, on a four-way ballot, Clinton's at 68, Trump at 20. Support for third-party candidates is ebbing. Libertarian Gary Johnson's at 8 and Jill Stein at 1. Enthusiasm about voting peaked in March when Bernie was on the ballot. Likelihood to vote dropped a bit in the August survey and a bit more in the October survey. Even as the election neared and the Clinton campaign unleashed speeches and surrogates designed to energize young voters. So the negative tone of the campaign has had an impact, but the first debates clearly damaged Trump. Only 47% of millennial women support Clinton. They're not particularly attracted to Trump at 18, but 18% support Johnson or Stein. 65% of millennial men support Clinton. This is interesting. So you have the millennial men much more solid for Clinton than millennial women are.
All right.
Surprising. I would have thought it would be much more even. Anyway,
I'll accept it.
The question is, will they show?
Always a good question.
Always a good question for them, so that's one of those things that you just don't know.
What are they doing otherwise?
Well, what else is on?
I don't know. I mean, it's Tuesday.
Yeah. Here's one from, just to give you an idea of how things are going, this is our friend Michael Bitzer. It's not a L, it's a Blitzer. That's Wolf. This is right. Michael Bitzer, also known as Bowtie Politics, on Twitter. And he looks at North Carolina, and he's looking at 5 weeks of North Carolina absentee by mail in ballots. And it turns out, we've gone over this data before, but it's looking very promising for the Democrats. Normally, Republican requests and returned ballots are way greater than Democrats, who are slightly greater than independents, but not this year.
I like greater than, but yes, okay.
Not this year.
No.
This year, we have, as of today, this year's returned and accepted mail-in ballots are currently 78% of where same-day totals were in 2012. Registered Republicans are 56% of their 2012 same-day numbers. Registered Democrats are at 103%, and registered unaffiliated voters are 107%.
Really? Okay.
So basically what's happening, and this will be interesting, is, the numbers are down. People just aren't as interested in this election as they are in other elections. We think it's going to be a low turnout vote. Actually, what does this look like? This looks like it's the Republicans who are going to be not turning up, and everybody else is doing the same as usual.
Yes. There are disinterested people.
A senator running in this state, for example.
Yeah. That's where, I mean, wow, they're running at 50%.
56.
Well, okay. So it's about 50, well, why not say just 56%, I guess. That would have been a lot quicker if I had just done that right off the bat. And everybody else is breaking, well, if not the records, then beating last time out.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're up, and we're up, and they're down. And independents are up.
And they're down, and independents are a little bit up. They're about where they always were. Democrats are about where they always were. Republicans are,
we're up, but independents are ordering their ballots, but refusing to fill them out. And maybe that's their compromise.
Can't decide, right? They sent it in saying, I can't decide.
I can't decide what color pen to use. Oh, my gosh. Yeah.
But anyway, just a fascinating look, and I think Florida will also look pretty good for Democrats, in Iowa not so much. Things we knew.
All right.
Right? We have a whole bunch of polls from yesterday, just to make sure. I want to mention them all. This morning, of course, we had the NBC News Survey Monkey, Clinton +6. We have Rasmussen reports, Clinton +1. We have the LA Times, Trump +2. Again, mentioned not because those latter ones are particularly good polls. In fact, they're outliers, but they do affect the Real Clear Politics average. And even so, even with listing these polls, the four-way in the Real Clear Politics average is Clinton +7. And the two-way is also Clinton +7. That's about a point behind where Huffington Post has it. And that's all, excellent news. In fact, RCP's David Byler, one of their more or less neutral analysts, has a piece today called Trump Misses Benchmarks is Running Out of Time.
Okay.
Can Donald Trump catch up to Hillary Clinton in the polls before Election Day? I've asked that question a few times over the past couple of months, and for much of August and September, the answer has been a qualified yes. That means when he writes it, he said, it is possible. We're not seeing it, but it's possible. But recent events, a bad performance at the first presidential debate, release of an interview showing Trump making lewd comments about women, middling second debate performance, to name a few. Notice how it's gelled that actually Trump didn't win the second debate over time. Have widened Clinton's lead. And based on quantitative polling benchmarks I developed in August, a Trump comeback is improbable. Yeah. Basically, what he's saying is that if you look at all the other elections that we have data for, given that we are here in time with just 3 weeks to go, today's Tuesday.
We are here.
Right, 21 days. Generally speaking, the polls don't move from now until Election Day more than about 3 points. So if you're winning by 7, and the polls in other elections have only moved one way or the other by 3 points, that means Clinton could win by 10.
Yes.
Or Clinton could win by 4, but it's extremely improbable that Trump's going to be able to catch her.
I would think so.
Okay, and so he points out they're not ironclad laws, but it'd just be really, really, really unlikely for somebody to lose this kind of lead this late in the game. And that still leaves a possibility that Clinton could lead by double figures, which some of the live caller polls are in fact saying that we are at. So it wouldn't be shocking if she won by more than Obama did in 2008, which is my benchmark for where are we at really.
Yeah, and a fine one. This will be interesting. Of course, we're also beginning to see the emergence of the, she doesn't have a mandate because she only won because Donald Trump was so terrible theme, too. So the higher the numbers, the better.
The higher the numbers, the better. The more states, the better. That's why it's so interesting that Trump is going to be in Colorado, a state he has no chance of winning, whereas Michelle Obama and others are going to be in Arizona. A state she does have a chance of winning. Latest poll actually has her up by 2. So she's making a play for Arizona, maybe Georgia. I don't think Utah is going to be. If Utah doesn't go to Trump, it's going to be because of Evan McMullen and other factors that don't have to do with Hillary campaigning. So that'll be an interesting state to watch in terms of what's going on.
Yes.
But she's clearly expanding the map and going for a larger win and certainly trying to pick up a couple of states, maybe besides North Carolina, that used to be Romney states. She may still lose Iowa, and Ohio is the true swing state, which may go either way, not that she needs it for her win. But everything else is looking pretty solid. While all of this is happening, what does Donald Trump tweet this morning? At 7:30 this morning, he tweets, or he retweets somebody who said 41% of American voters believe the election could be stolen from Donald Trump due to widespread voter fraud. So not only is he trying to spread this idea, he's retweeting the idea, congratulating himself for spreading this idea. Everything that you think is toxic and anathema to democracy, Donald Trump is doing. So it's really going to be very nice to see him lose.
Well, I'll enjoy it.
Well, I will too.
And the eventual bankruptcy of Trump TV as well.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Mark Murray summarizes for us some of the favorable, unfavorable ratings. Remember, when we look at the NBC Wall Street Journal poll, we didn't have time to do it because there was so much other stuff going on yesterday.
Okay.
One of the nice things is they take the positives and then they subtract the negatives and see where you stand.
Accentuate the positives and eliminate the negatives.
And find out who anybody is. Do they really know who you are? Michelle Obama is a plus 34.
Yes. She's doing well. She should run for something.
Barack Obama is a plus 12.
Not as good because he's president.
But those are the two most popular politicians in the country. And having them stump for you is kind of like a good thing.
Yes.
Oh, by the way, before I forget, also, I think, who really needs a pat on the back or deserves one?
Someone who's choking.
No, Bernie Sanders.
Oh, yes.
Bernie has been spending a tremendous amount of time campaigning for Clinton, not complaining about the dumb WikiLeaks leaks, not complaining about the stolen emails, not complaining about how he's spoken about both his campaign manager and especially he have been, he's doing 2-3 rallies a day for her this week and last week. Very quietly. It's not on in the news. But, he's doing yeoman's work. He's doing the job that you would expect anybody who is in the same party to do for you. Trump doesn't have that kind of support.
Right. True. Is he in the same party still?
Well, he's Democrat for now, and he's favorable and unfavorables are not listed here, so I can't tell you what they are. But Mike Pence gets a 8, plus 8. Tim Kaine gets a 0. That is to say 29-29. Not that many people know who he is. Alicia Machado gets a minus 2. Nobody knows who she is. Total positive 9, total negative 11. But here's where it gets interesting. Democratic Party minus 3. Paul Ryan minus 7. Hillary Clinton minus 10. Does anybody call Paul Ryan unpopular? They should. They say it about Clinton all the time.
True. Most unpopular ever.
They're in the exact same range.
That is odd.
And Paul Ryan was a former candidate for the vice presidency from the Republican Party.
True.
Now you start to drop off. Republican Party minus 23, and Donald Trump is a minus 33.
Yes. Okay.
But
Satan is next.
Satan's next. But let's look at those same things with their oversample of NBC Wall Street Journal Telemundo survey. Latinos only.
I see.
Okay. Michelle Obama with everybody was a 34, and with Latinos she's a 62.
Well, they like her. That's nice. Okay.
Barack was a 12. With Latinos, he's a 48.
I see.
Okay. Hillary Clinton was a minus 10 with everybody, but with Latinos, she's a plus 31, and the Democratic Party is a plus 31. And Tim Kaine is a plus 13, and Alicia Machado is a plus 12. People know who she is. Mike Pence is a minus 6. The Republican Party is a minus 41, and we talked about this the other day. Donald Trump is a minus 67.
I may be Latino.
That was that 129 spread between Michelle and Donald.
I got to go get one of those DNA tests.
Right. That was kind of interesting.
Yeah. Well, that's how about that? And consider that less than 4 years ago, the Republican autopsy said, we got to make inroads here.
Exactly.
Good
so
job.
The last 2 stories I have here are more narrative-type stories.
More narrative.
And they're in there, but I sent you such a long list, I think I'll just send them at the bottom so you can find them. The first one is from Salon and Simon Malloy writing, Donald Trump's North Carolina death spiral, even white suburbanites flee the idiot. I like the title. Only strong anti-Clinton sentiment is keeping Trump afloat in North Carolina's heavily Republican suburbs. So he went down to North Carolina and talked to people.
Who did that?
Simon Malloy.
Oh.
Which was kind of interesting. And he says the sexual allegations against Trump influenced one guy, Tommy Crawford, 57-year-old transportation worker, self-identified independent who voted for Obama twice. Crawford said he's still undecided, but lately he's become leaning toward Clinton. I asked him why. He said while he had once been open to the idea of backing Trump, the accusations toward women, the bus, the video, I think it was it. The sentiment, Crawford added, was common among his friends and associates that people I know are more and more now leaning towards Hillary because of the last few weeks. And I do think that there's going to be some people that, in fact, breaking for Hillary the last couple of weeks. I think a lot of the people parked in the third parties and the undecideds will do so. Most of those, when you look at polling, asking, well, if you didn't vote for either one, of the main candidates. How do you feel about them? And it's like 3-1 against Trump. So I don't think that there's a huge reservoir of people to pull from there. And I think that's how it's going to go. And then finally, really interesting piece in the New Yorker, kind of a long read. Steve Bannon's vision for the Trump coalition after Election Day.
Okay. I mean, I guess you should check on what he's thinking.
Right? It's no surprise Trump's been advised for decades by Roger Stone, a prominent political strategist and conspiracy theorist who believes that Lyndon Johnson had Kennedy killed. Stone is silent on Rafael Cruz's role, he points out. And that George H.W. Bush may have tried to kill Reagan. It's not shocking that Trump has been a regular guest on the radio show of Alex Jones, who, among interesting things, believe Americans are in danger of being controlled by clockwork elves. I've never looked into that one. I don't even know what that means.
I don't know. That's a new one.
Yeah. While I read this, maybe you can Google that and figure out what the heck he's talking about.
Not the Icelandic elves.
Yeah, maybe.
Clockwork elves.
Clockwork elves.
Imagine what that would be.
Alex Jones, Clockwork Elves. If you Google that, what do you get? But it took someone a little smarter, more cynical than Trump, Stone, or Jones to distill Trump's platform of protectionism, closed borders, white identity politics into one message about a global conspiracy, and that was Steve Bannon. Okay. So it's a Bannon story here, embracing the growing populist movement, the alt-right, comparing it to some European nationalists.
Oh my gosh.
And some of the ambitions beyond here. Bannon's view of the media is similarly narrow. He sees the dominant conservative media players as the establishment, not allies. He views Fox News as unreliable on the nationalist cause and was not unhappy when Roger Ailes was forced to resign. He despises Rupert Murdoch as a pro-open borders globalist. When Bannon ran Breitbart, he didn't want his reporters appearing on Fox because he believed the cable news channel had made smaller conservative news outlets subservient to it. It's all interesting.
Wait a minute. Open borders globalist?
Yeah,
oh,
Rupert Murdoch.
Oh, okay. I'm like, when it was Bannon once one of the? Okay.
No, he thinks Rupert Murdoch is, therefore hates Murdoch.
Okay, terrific. By the way,
who happens to be CEO of the News Corporation and acting CEO of Fox News.
Yes, and everything else.
Right, so he hates Fox.
Clockwork elves are crazy. Oh my God. Okay.
Right. So the rhetoric that Bannon is feeding Trump makes it increasingly likely that Trump will lose in a landslide. Polling averages show Trump trailing Clinton by 8 points, largest gap since August when Clinton received a significant boost after the convention. And most election forecasts at the time of this writing put Clinton's chances of victory at about 80%, make that 90% now.
Yeah.
And don't forget, every day that ticks off, those numbers are just going to go up. Trump's response to these numbers have been to tell his supporters repeatedly in recent days the elections is rigged, creating a sense of grievance about likely results. Trump and Bannon have given up on trying to defeat Clinton. They seem more interested in creating a platform for a new ethno-nationalist politics that may bedevil the Republican Party in the country for a long time to come. On Sunday morning, I asked a top Trump official, do you think there's any chance that Trump would refuse to concede if he loses? And the official responded, he's not going to lose.
Okay.
So that's where we're at on that one.
Problem.
And so, this is more evidence that maybe he really is thinking about some kind of network, whether it's TV or otherwise, to build on his Pat Buchanan party.
Yeah, which has worked out great for Pat Buchanan.
It'll be an interesting time.
Yes.
That's all I can say. So, contours of the race, Clinton's winning, Trump is losing, Senate still up for grabs, but every day we get closer to the election, the Republican hold on the Senate looks more and more shaky. And the House is just a complete unknown at this particular point in time. Obviously, the odds are that the Republicans hold the House, but we just don't know. What we do know is who's going to win the White House, and it's not going to be Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So with that, I'll sum up and say thank you. This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my good friend David Waldman, Kagro in the Morning. You may know him as. Thanks so much for listening. Download podcast wherever you do it. This show is a good way to just go over this stuff in your head and do it out loud with our friends and listeners. And it sure beats throwing your shoe at the TV when Morning Joe is on, which I tend to do whenever I watch it. I was watching it today because John Della Volpe from the Cosmopolitan and Harvard Institute was going to talk about his polling this morning. And I generally watch Morning Joe for the guests, not for the hosts. But boy, were they bad this morning. It was all about railing at Eastern and Western coastal elites, as if Joe isn't one of them, and about how we get Trump voters wrong, and it's all about grievance and the libtards and he didn't say that, but he was certainly implying it. And the elites just don't understand real people. And of course, he had Mike Barnacle chime in to say this is exactly right, and nobody gives Trump voters any credit. They're called racist and stupid and all these other things, and nobody really appreciates them. And I noticed Armando on Twitter and I having the exact same reaction. You talk about this as if the whole entire country is white males. It's like no women, no people of color. They don't count. They're not part of this equation. It's an incredible example of male white privilege on display, getting angry because their world isn't winning anymore.
They had to leave the locker room and find out that there's other people out there, the people that don't
so
let
what
in their
happens?
clubs.
They get on the bus expecting one thing with Billy Bush, and they find out that the bus is an integrated place with a lot of different people and a lot of different point of view.
Yeah.
And you know what?
Diversity microphone.
When you have that kind of diversity, the food is a whole lot better.
Oh, that's true. Wait, it is? It is. It's very nice. And
that just goes together.
Yeah. Beyond taco bowls.
Anyway, take care, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right. Very good. Thanks, Greg. I might not be back until I found out what clockwork elves are, but okay.
You did?
Sort of. I think he's on drugs.
This could be. Well, I'll have to listen and find out.
Yeah.
Take care.
Okay. Thank you. I don't know if I can go forward with this. This is nutty beyond nutty. So I didn't type in Alex Jones. I just typed in Clockwork Elves. And I wonder, do I get different results if I say Clockwork Elves Alex Jones? Yeah, well, I get clips of him talking about it, but I think I prefer approaching this from not the standpoint of show me videotape of Alex Jones being crazy, but what is he talking about? Where does the kernel of truth or in this case, there's not even that, but where does this all stem from? Like, I mean, I've never heard that. I have no idea what that could possibly be. The top hit on Clockwork Elves without quotation marks is, well, I guess the top hit here is from a site, like a sort of a wiki type site, not Wikipedia, because I don't know. I mean, I guess they have imaginary creatures in Wikipedia too, because why not? But this is from a wikia.com wiki. And I don't even know what kind of URL is this. Non-alien creatures .wikia, wiki/machine elf. That's the entry as it's entitled. So, okay, Clockwork Elf, Machine Elf, both equally crazy sounding. What is it? Machine elves, and this looks to be sort of like a, I don't know, science fiction, science fantasy type site, I guess. What would you call this thing? Fandom powered by Wiki. All right, well, anyway, let me read you the entry. It's ridiculous. Machine elves, also known as fractal elves, self-transforming elf machines, or, and this seems a little simpler, Jenny, like Jenny, that kind of, as far as come, Jenny, the name, is a term coined by the late ethnobotanist. Timeout. Ethnobotanist. I don't even know what that is. What's an ethnobotanist? Ethnobotany. Tell me what that is. It's the scientific study of the traditional knowledge and customs of people concerning plants and their medical, religious, and other uses. Okay. So, I mean, that's what what it sounded like, but I was sort of just checking. Ethnobotany. Okay. So a ethnobotanist by the name of Terence McKenna has made this up. And then he died. So I don't know whether that was an immediate result of having made this thing up, but he's dead. He's the late ethnobotanist, writer, and philosopher, Terence McKenna. and I guess he's got an entry. Almost makes me want to click on it and see what it might be. They're telling me I'm now leaving non-alien creatures wiki. Do I think I ought to do that? Yes, please, as quickly as possible. Okay, that takes me to Wikipedia itself. He's time out, I guess, to read this. Terence Kemp McKenna. He died in 2000. He couldn't take the result of the election. April 2000. So before then. A relatively young man at that. Although I'm getting a sense of maybe how he died. He was an American ethnobotanist, mystic, psychonaut. I'm going to click on everything. Psychonautics, I'm told by Wikipedia, refers to both a methodology for describing and explaining the subjective effects of altered states of consciousness, including those induced by meditation or mind-altering substances, and to a research paradigm in which the researcher voluntarily immerses himself or herself into an altered mental state in order to explore the accompanying experiences. So, like the movie Altered States, I guess, plus also taking a lot of drugs, I guess, which leads me back to Terence McKenna, who died in April 2000 at the age of what? 44, I guess. He was born in November of 1946. So 43 years old, and guess what? He immerses himself in psychotropic drugs, and he dies. But before he does, he comes up with a worldview that explains everything for Alex Jones, I guess. So he's an ethnobotanist. Now we know why. He's considered an ethnobotanist because he's a psychonaut, particularly a psychonaut who eats the psychoactive plants of other cultures, I guess. Mystic, I don't know how you get that. Is it a degree? Or you just say, I'm mystic. There I am. Lecturer, author, and an advocate for the responsible use. Oh, well, I'm sorry. I was hanging this on him unfairly. The responsible use of naturally occurring psychedelic plants. And there are plenty of people who probably advocate for that just as ardently, and who survived as well. He spoke and wrote about a variety of subjects, including psychedelic drugs, plant-based entheogens. My goodness, what is that? Hell if I know. I mean, look it up for yourself. I'll tell you. It's an entheogen is any chemical substance used in a religious, shamanistic, or spiritual context that often induces psychological or physiological changes. Okay? Drugs. Got it? All right. Well, not drugs, I guess. Natural substances that we offhandedly refer to as drugs. Okay, so where were we? He spoke and wrote about all this stuff. Shamanism, metaphysics, alchemy, language, philosophy, culture, technology, environmentalism, and the theoretical origins of human consciousness. He was called the Timothy Leary of the 1990s. Well, the 90s anyway. One of the leading authorities on the ontological foundations of shamanism and the intellectual voice of rave culture. There you go. What else might you want to know? So the intellectual voice of rave culture. Alex Jones, Donald Trump, whatever. Machine elves, ladies and gentlemen. A term coined by this guy to describe what? The apparent entities that are often reported by individuals using tryptamine-based psychedelic drugs, especially DMT. Well, good. References to such encounters can be found in many cultures, ranging from shamanistic traditions of Native Americans to indigenous Australians and African tribes, as well as among Western users of these substances. So the big question is, how can this be happening across such diverse cultures that people are suddenly able to see the same robot creatures just because they're all taking the same drug? Because why would that have anything to do with anything? Well, Aboriginal culture in Australia, indigenous, I guess I should say, Australians and Indigenous Americans and non-Indigenous Americans all taking DMT. See little robot elves? That must mean something. It must mean they control the world. Thank you, Alex. At about, what is it? So about minute 1 or 2 of a DMT trip, according to McKenna, one may burst through a chrysanthemum-like mandala and find that, what? And find, oh my God, what's a chrysanthemum-like mandala? I don't know, I just burst through it. And you may find there's a whole bunch of entities waiting on the other side, saying, how wonderful that you're here. You come so rarely. We're so delighted to see you. They're like jeweled, self-dribbling basketballs, and there are many of them, and they come pounding toward you, and they will stop in front of you and vibrate, but then they do a very disconcerting thing. Now it gets disconcerting. Hold on to your hats. Which is, they jump into your body, and then they jump back out again, and the whole thing is going on in a high-speed mode where you're being presented with thousands of details per second, and you can't get a hold on them. And these things are saying, don't give in to astonishment, which is exactly what you want to do. You want to go nuts with how crazy this is, and they say, don't do that. Pay attention to what we're doing. What they're doing is making objects with their voices, singing structures into existence. This is clearly the basis for the next presidential administration. They offer things to you. See, you just want free stuff. Robot, elf, or not. Everybody just wants free stuff. They offer things to you saying, look at this, look at this. And as your attention goes towards these objects, you realize that what you're being shown is impossible. It's not simply intricate, beautiful, and hard to manufacture. It's impossible to make these things. The nearest analogy would be like, man, the Fabergé eggs. But these, I added the like man, I admit that one. But these things are like the toys that are scattered around the nursery inside a UFO. Double rainbow! What does it mean? Celestial toys. And the toys themselves appear to be somehow alive and can sing other objects into existence. So what's happening is this proliferation of elf gifts, which are moving around, singing, and they are saying, do what we are doing. And they are very insistent. And they say, do it, do it, do it. And you feel like a bubble inside your body beginning to move up toward your mouth. You're vomiting at this point. And when it comes out, it isn't sound, it's vision. See, it is vomit. You discover that you can pump stuff out of your mouth by singing, and they're urging you to do this. They say, that's it, keep going, keep doing it. Now we're at minute 4.5 of the trip, because he's keeping very close time. It's Swiss timing on this. And you speak in a kind of glossolalia. Are these words? I'm not certain what that's supposed to mean either, and I'll bet I can't look that one up. Okay. Well, should I finish this? I mean, I guess so. It's short, although I have breaking news being tweeted to me or texted to me by Greg, so I'll get to that in a minute. But first we need to know about the clockwork elves. There is a spontaneous outpouring of syntax unaccompanied by what is normally called meaning. So it's like a debate with Donald Trump. A little bit. That explains everything. After a minute or so of this whole thing begins to collapse in on itself, and they begin to physically move away from you. Usually their final shot is that they wave goodbye and say, déjà vu, déjà vu. This concept may be related to a tendency for the brain to imagining living entities during certain altered states. The best example of this, at least he's grounded here, right, is the extremely common feeling of a living presence during sleep paralysis, which has been theorized as the origin of the succubus, as well as a common theme in many alien abduction stories. Well, okay. I mean, in terms of like things people commonly imagine, this is helpful. However, Terence McKenna and Dr. Rick Strassman have both asserted the sense of reality of the experience is distinct from ordinary hallucinatory experiences, leading both researchers to speculate that perhaps the physics of many worlds is involved. Jacques Vallée, I guess, has proposed that the entities may be of an interdimensional nature in his interdimensional hypothesis. James Kent has put forward a different explanation for machine elves. You're all nuts, and it's imagined BS. Kent postulates, I take this seriously, that the DMT landscape is simply disrupting or editing our processing of visual information and causing a chaotic interpretation of it inspired by hyperactive phosphine activity. This does actually sound like it might be right. The brain may fill in the blanks, and since we all have an affinity for anthropomorphic things, do we? A humanoid entity may appear out of all this chaos. Our imaginal workplace will take the center stage in brain activity, allowing internal data to be interpreted as external stimuli. When reflecting upon his experiences, Aldous Huxley suggested that there was something which he called mind at large, which was filtered by the ordinary functioning of the human brain to produce ordinary experience. Well, I don't know what Alex Jones thinks they're doing, but I guess he thinks that they're fixing the elections and or spreading chemtrails. That is exciting to contemplate, but I am afraid I can't support that with my vote. Now, what's the breaking news that I've been sent here? From Sopan Deb's Twitter stream, per Scholastic, the school book and weekly reader people, you remember that back when you were a kid? Kids vote for the darndest presidential candidates. Okay, and this comes via Britt Sullivan, who is Scholastic's digital publicist, as it happens. Dateline, New York. October 18th, 2016. Approximately 153,000 students across the country in grades kindergarten through 12, K through 12, as they say, cast their ballots in the 2016 Scholastic News student vote, and the results are in. Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton has been named the winner with 52% of the student vote, while Republican candidate Donald Trump received 35%. 13% of student voters wrote in other choices, a larger percentage than in past presidential elections. Write-in votes were cast for Libertarian Party candidate Gary Johnson, 2%, Senator Bernie Sanders, 1%, and Green Party candidate Jill Stein, 1%, along with Mom, Kanye West, Harambe the Gorilla, obviously. It's good that the kids remember. Spider-Man and Bacon. So, well done, kids. K through 12, huh? This is important. Okay, Mom getting a lot of votes. Which Mom? I'm not sure. Kanye West, interestingly enough, picking up a significant portion of write-in ballots. Okay. Jill Stein, not much more than either of them. And I guess I would like to see whether Mom got more votes than Jill Stein. Probably the gorilla did as well. Anyway, gosh, that's interesting. So, machine elves. That's really surprising. So that's what they are. Is there anything else here? I mean, here's something that mentions the government along with it. From mysteriousuniverse.org, a bad trip with the clockwork elves. Is there a government DMT conspiracy? Yes. Dimethyltryptamine, more popularly known as DMT, is one of the most powerful hallucinations, is what it says. Hallucinogens known to man. Is that the stuff? No, I'm sorry. That they were using in the movie Lucy. I don't know. Maybe it was. I can't remember. That was a fascinating film, but it's not this. In addition to having startling psychoactive properties that have been likened to a full-throttle blast from the mind's cannon and into a colorful, altered hyperspace. I'm sure who they have been likened to that. One guy likened it to. It's like a full throttle blast from the mind's cannon, man. Yeah, it is like, what's the mind's cannon? I don't know. Anyway, there are a number of unique aspects about the substance that make it far more peculiar than most psychedelic substances, and almost legendary for its mystique and dangerous intrigue. Of course, Like most powerful hallucinogens, DMT is against the law to use and possess in the United States, which is sort of strange, man, considering the fact that our bodies produce it, like in the pineal gland, as theorized by researcher Rick Strassman in his book DMT, The Spirit Molecule. However, George Washington grew hemp, man. That's what it reminds me of. However, when it comes to the strange aspects often associated with DMT and its use, few would suspect that the government agencies could be involved in some secretive attempt to use it to contact extraterrestrials. Or would they? It actually does say that. Or would they? I didn't even have to add that. Wow. I mean, I guess just for the craziness of it, I want to see what else this says. I was both astonished and somewhat dumbfounded when Red Pill Junkie, my compatriot from over at the Daily Grail website, shared with me a link to post at the site that featured popular conspiracy radio host Alex Jones discussing an elitist movement among the upper echelons of the, quote, shadow government to try and use DMT to contact extraterrestrials. Why can't I say, maybe I've had DMT in my coffee, and that's why I can't say the word extraterrestrials. It's messing me up like Planetarium from South Park. A seemingly distraught Jones, how can you tell, noting throughout the monologue that he, quote, shouldn't be talking about this stuff. What an idiot. I shouldn't be talking about this stuff, man. They're going to come and get me. And then his listeners aren't ready for it. It's just like classic stuff. He goes on to say the conspiracies rooted in satanic worship aren't any real threat, as has been proposed over the years, especially within the context of alleged ritual abuse scares obtained mostly through hypnotic regression. Instead, what? Jones asserts that what is really occurring, he's got the inside line on this, is that power-hungry globalists believe they're making contact with extraterrestrial entities. And just as proposed in it says Nook, but I assume he means book, Magic, Mysticism, and the Molecule, some of these individuals may be looking to DMT as a means of contacting sentient intelligences from other worlds. And that's what's happening. Hillary Clinton is on DMT, and that's the performance-enhancing substance she's taking before the debates. She's accessing extraterrestrial intelligence to beat Donald Trump. I could sit here and tell you about it all day, man, but you might do better just to watch the clip and draw your own conclusions. Here's the excerpt from Jones's program in question. We will not be doing that. I have to say I was initially amused by this clip and Jones's use of expressions like clockwork elves, a reference to Terence McKenna's fractal elves, machine elves, or tykes, as he sometimes calls them. However, as readers of my book know, much of the information he's discussing here is indeed based in fact. Although I'll tell you that I've never come across notions that power-hungry globalists were, as Jones says, gobbling DMT so they could meet clockwork elves and alien beings. In my best estimation, what the information presented here comprises amounts to an amalgamation of half-truths, but there is still a startling amount of consistency with at least a few things Jones addresses here. What are your thoughts? Has Jones, like so many have already been asserting, finally lost it? At long last, I guess. Or has he merely come to the conclusion that he must finally address the truly fringe elements of greater mysteries such as UFOs and extraterrestrials, or at the very least, the perceived belief in such things by conspiratorial groups like the Bilderbergs? It would be terrifying indeed, noting the parallels here not only to my research into such things, but to some degree the sorts of things my fellow MU blogger Nick Redfern has addressed in his book, Final Events, if there were any truth to this. I've lost the train of this guy's thought. Perhaps the most alarming thing having to do with all of this is really just the chance that Jones, at least in part, could be right. I have no other sound effects that are worth I guess.
Liar! Liar! Liar!
There's that, too. And
wrong, sir. Wrong.
That is not how this works!
Okay. Well, I think that pretty much wraps it up. And also maybe...
boring!
Okay. I think we're done with that. That's crazy. what I really enjoy at the end is that the guy starts to get worried that the crazy guy might be onto something because it agrees with his book. But he's the crazy one, not me. I got it right. Oh, my gosh. Well, that is pretty amazing. I think you got it right there, Parlio, who tweets at Trump Machine Elf 2020. I guess that there is your ticket next time on. Oh, Bjorn, who has been to the land of the elves, not the machine elves. I don't know. I mean, maybe DMT might not be illegal in Norway. I'm not really sure. But he says glossolalia is speaking. Okay, that makes some sense. Speaking in tongues, as in Pentecostal churches. Now, that's what I was I didn't think that was the definition of it, but that makes sense that it is, because, as I was saying, that's what came to mind when I was reading. What was the description that we got from the Wiki article about something about, verbal effluvia without meaning or whatever, however they put it. I can't recall now. But, that made me think of, well, maybe it is. It's either like listening to a Sarah Palin speech or speaking in tongues, which many people thought was exactly the same thing. And that stands to some reason, because she is a Pentecostal evangelical type person and might very well believe in stuff like that. Okay. Well, thanks for helping me out with the English there, Norwegian guy. I appreciate it. Every little bit helps. Okay. What has really happened in the world that we can talk about? There's a couple of things I need to catch up on. This is an interesting. I'm going to read this story for the first time, I guess, as I often do on the air. I want to get to the bottom of this and see if I can tease out the meaning of it. Yesterday's reports of the weekend firebombing of the Republican office in Orange County, North Carolina. Still a controversial thing. Still a lot of people arguing over whether or not Democrats ought to contribute to a fund to restore this thing, given that, after all, the Republican Party in North Carolina is a particularly odious one, not only for the policy they're producing at the legislative level for, say, transgender issues and, all sorts of issues across the board, but in particular, the draconian voter suppression laws that they not only adopted, but that they adopted with the explicit and admitted purpose of suppressing minority votes. Why do we want to help them get back on their feet? Well, like most things, it's a complex issue. I don't know where. I know what I'm doing, and I guess if I'm giving advice to people who are on the fence, I'd say you could probably do better with your money elsewhere. But I don't know. I don't know how much condemnation I really feel like bringing down on people who are trying to demonstrate the inherent goodness of, well, at least of themselves. I'm not going to argue with you about it that much. But here's the bigger news here. And I want to read the original source article here from NBC News, because I saw it reported or commented upon, spun really, I guess, by another website. It was that came up the other day, and I was surprised by the name. Right, Daily Newsbin. I'm not familiar with them. I wanted to see whether maybe they read it a little bit aggressively. But here's the NBC News headline: North Carolina Republican office firebombed. Nazi GOP threatened in graffiti. So same lead. Let's see if this material that Daily Newsbin says they spotted in this article is actually there. Okay, so the facts are still the same. The firebombing of the office, the graffiti on the nearby building. Let's see. So again, comments from Hillsborough's mayor about the disturbing act going far beyond vandalizing property, threatens the community, undermines decency, respect and integrity and civic participation, etc. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and the FBI were assisting local and state authorities in the investigation. Now, here's the part that interested the Daily News. But North Carolina Republican Party spokeswoman Emily Weeks, told NBC News that the office is totally unusable. And here's Armando just sort of chiming in saying Daily Newsbin is not reliable. I had that, I think I just had that feeling generally. So I'll read what is actually in the NBC article here, and then if it doesn't comport with what Daily Newsbin said in its spin, I'll tell you that. I'll tell you one way or the other, I guess. So the North Carolina Republican Party spokeswoman Emily Weeks, this is the part that was interesting, says the office is totally unusable, not surprising, and that materials inside may have been destroyed, not surprising. The state party said completed absentee ballots were not stored at that office. Now, that's likely true. It's just a question of why did that come up at all? And down at the bottom, we note that there is a correction appended here. A previous version of this article quoted a party official as saying completed absentee ballots might have been destroyed in the attack at the Orange County Republican Party office, which was incorrect. The North Carolina Republican Party and its county organizations do not collect completed absentee ballots. That's where the Daily Newsbin spin came in. Their version of this story was that a North Carolina Republican Party official at first admitted that there were completed, or may at least have been completed, absentee ballots being stored in the office, and that the fire may have destroyed them. And I guess the theory here would be, oh, well, we want to make the fire seem as damaging or as pointedly partisan as possible. Why would Democrats go ahead and do this? Well, part of the reason may be not just that they hate us, not just that they think we're Nazis, but that they thought that they might be able to affect the outcome of the vote by burning the completed absentee ballots which we were storing in this office. And that was when it struck them. I guess that was supposed to make it sound like now the crime is particularly egregious. People may be deprived of their votes by this horrible, horrible act. There's lots of reasons to think it's a horrible act, but that's not supposed to be one of them, and I guess they realized that pretty quickly. It would be illegal 10 different ways to Sunday to be storing completed absentee ballots anywhere, I guess except in a postal facility or a elections facility. To be storing them in a county Republican office would be tantamount to voter fraud, which of course they are sure exists all over the place except only perpetrated by Democrats. So I guess they rather quickly had to come back out and say, oh yeah, what I meant was no way in hell were completed absentee ballots stored in this office or destroyed in the fire in this office, because they were never there. I don't know why Emily Weeks said that, but it's totally, totally not true. And, I guess Daily Newsbin, unreliable though they may be, has some basis in fact to be able to say, well, it's quite curious that the Republican spokeswoman said that that was the case and then had to come back out and say that it wasn't. In all likelihood, it wasn't the case and it never was the case, but Emily Weeks is an overzealous idiot and thought that it made it sound like a worse crime if that had happened. And then somebody said, that's the dumbest thing you could possibly say. You just hinted that we were committing voter fraud. You need to get back out there and say, oh, no. I meant nothing of the sort happened and never could. And it would be ridiculous to suggest that it might. That's how dumb I really am. Get back out there and say that. So that it raises an eyebrow. I can say that. It's a pretty dumb thing to say. If it's true, you're all under arrest. Sorry. So there you go. I just thought that was an interesting addition to the firebombing story. Well worth sharing. Let's see. Something I wanted to discuss yesterday but ran out of time on, and I thought I would bring it up because the Billy Bush story lingers, and the other comments that he's made about everybody. women in general, pageant contestants, the stories about him walking in intentionally on naked pageant contestants, his comments about his daughter Ivanka and how he regards her and how he thinks others ought to regard her, etc. All of which came out in a tidal wave following the Billy Bush tapes. Were largely by Andrew Kaczynski and his move over from BuzzFeed to CNN, and largely mined from Donald Trump's appearances on Howard Stern show. And so much of it comes from Howard Stern's shows that, it's garnered a lot of attention and a lot of media discussion over just what exactly is. I mean, are we at the point where Howard Stern is really possibly affecting the outcome of this election, which is an amazing development all by itself, and what does it mean? And I had this article from a couple days back. I think this is in October. I'll have to open it up and make sure of the date. October 6th, I think, was the date on this thing, from Politico. There it is. Virginia Heffernan had a piece in Politico, looks like the Politico magazine, called How Howard Stern Owned Donald Trump. And I think this helps to explain sort of the origin of this weird dynamic going on between the two of them. And then there's a current article, a follow-up piece of sorts, not by the same people or in the same publication, just, I think, giving some context to this whole thing. And where are all these quotes coming from? How did it happen? Why does he say this stuff on the radio? To anyone who's listened to the Howard Stern show since it hit the national airwaves in 1986, Stern's name still conjures the snicker of adolescent dirty talk and the occasional sicko comment about Columbine or the developmentally disabled. But now, to the WTF of his own audience, Stern has emerged at the center of the national political conversation, a ghost in the machine of the 2016 presidential campaign. It was on Stern's show, after all, that Donald Trump, then a Playboy real estate mogul, called former Miss Universe turned Hillary Clinton supporter Alicia Machado an eating machine. That's where it came from. He said it on Howard Stern's show. It was on Stern's show that Trump now infamously said that he supported the Iraq War with his "I guess so," remember that? A recording that flatly disproves his countless claims he was against it. On Stern's show, Trump also said it's hard to be a 10 if a woman is flat-chested, and called the challenge of avoiding STDs his personal Vietnam. If the political class is appalled by the notion that anything from the morass of 90s shock jock radio could become a part of the presidential race, it may be just as surprising to Stern's fans who proudly embraced the outsiderness of a guy who couldn't seem further from inside the Beltway political chatter. And I will say this, some context to the Howard Stern thing, at least for me. I listened to Howard Stern for a long time. Before 1986, I was in his market, and when he was on in the New York radio market through the earlier 80s, and of course many people, I guess, down here in Washington, D.C. know him from his days in Washington, D.C. before moving on to New York. But both when he was local and then when he went national, I mean, if you're familiar with him and the way he does the show and the approach he takes to life, beyond, I'm not saying he's like a philosopher or anything, but beyond the obvious surface gross stuff that most people tend to think of if they don't listen to the show but know who he is and have learned about him in passing, usually from his most controversial things, that, almost by way of excuse, he is, when he's interviewing anybody, but in particular a person like Donald Trump who's got a proclivity for this sort of talk, he's looking to draw this stuff out of him. It's not necessarily something that Donald Trump might have offered up on his own, but he appears on the show so frequently, both because he seems at least like the kind of person who would be in a position to be able to tell such stories firsthand, even if he really hadn't had those experiences. It sounds believable enough because he's Donald Trump and he's famous and ostensibly rich, but also he loves to spill the beans on stuff like this. And so from the Howard Stern perspective, it's just good radio. We have a guy on here who's going to babble and just dig himself a giant hole, though he wasn't running for office at the time. He was just letting people know that he was just I guess something like what Melania said, just a stupid kid at heart. Anyway, I just think that there's some understanding that needs to accompany the revelations here, which is that Stern is doing all he can to elicit this kind of response from Trump. And Trump, though, is willingly obliging, no doubt about that. But it's a little different than just, say, if he sat down with, I don't know, pick a serious radio commentator or television commentator. He just wouldn't start talking about these topics at all, I assume. But okay, he did. He did it. That's all there is to it. Back to the article. But surprising as Stern's sudden arrival at the center of American politics is, the Stern-Trump encounters are also strikingly revealing, showcasing a strange, mutually manipulative relationship that tells us a lot about both men. Age has chastened Stern, who's now more a searching interviewer on Sirius XM, or who's now a more searching interviewer on Sirius XM, as the New York Times recently noted. But he was ascendant at the time, still playing the famous, if haggard, firebrand surrounded in studio by his team of carnies. Trump, meanwhile, was in personal and professional trouble, fishing for any publicity he could get, and in Stern he found someone who was willing to put him on national radio over and over, some 24 times in the 1990s and the aughts, according to counts by BuzzFeed and the Huffington Post. This much-craved publicity, of course, came at a price. Stern has long had a devilish talent for lulling guests into a false sense of security, and that's relevant to our second piece here later on, but please note that, and then luring them into rhetorical traps. He casts his guests in a burlesque, he scripts for them, and cattle prods them into playing their parts, first fawning over them until they feel like celebrities, then bringing down the hammer of humiliation. He's a diabolically domineering scene partner. No interviewer has ever been as adroit with treacherous leading questions in the vein of, when did you stop beating your wife? Stern, in other words, gets people to publicly embrace their worst selves and say things they live to regret. That may be overstating the case a little bit, but you get the idea. That's a much more coherent expression of the kind of dynamic I was hoping to at least warn people existed in underneath all this. That's exactly what happened with Trump. Today, as the Republican nominee, he may fashion himself as a boss and a master of the universe, but what comes across in old tapes of the show, resurfaced recently by BuzzFeed and other outlets, is that Trump, like many of Stern's guests, was often the one being played, by nailing him as a buffoon and then, unkindest cut, forcing him to kiss the Howard Stern ring. Stern and his co-anchor, Robin Quivers, created a series of broadcasts that today showcase not just Trump's misogyny, but his ready submission to sharper minds. And that's dangerous, right? I mean, Howard Stern beat him. I think Putin might be able to, too. Why would people subject themselves to Stern's hazing? Generally, his guests in those days, if not strippers and professional opera buffa types, had to have been brought pretty low, so that a combination of psychological fragility and hunger for celebrity made them vulnerable to his mock camaraderie. That's why it's important to remember that Trump, in the period of his appearances on the show, was deeply in the red. I guess I'll pause here for just a second and say, I don't know that Howard Stern had any conscious plan to seek guests who had been brought low so that a combination of psychological fragility and hunger for celebrity made them vulnerable to his mock camaraderie. He was just, the Stern shtick is generally that he's, if not an everyman necessarily, but just that he's just a regular-ish guy exploring his own interests, insecurities, foibles, with no holds barred, and wants to see if other people will do the same. And who does he want to explore that with? Anybody that his audience of general, regular, everymen and women, in many cases, would recognize as famous. It didn't really matter why you were famous, just so long as you were, and then he could try and get you to discuss your personal life as explicitly as he discussed his. And I don't know if it was necessarily any kind of a weird plot to find people with low stability or self-esteem, so much as it was, hey, everyone will recognize the name of this famous person. This is the level at which it worked. Let's bring him on the air and ask him if he ever made a duty. Like that. And he would literally use that word. It's actually kind of entertaining because he uses that stupid schoolyard word at the time when he was on not on Sirius XM, where I guess you can say anything you want. He was always most creative in finding ways of describing even the most eminently censorable act in terms that were at least technically radio permissible. That was, I think, his greatest talent. He would just bring people on there because, sitting around in the car, commuting to work, or being bored in your cubicle, or wherever it was you were listening to the Howard Stern show. I can't believe that guy just asked a famous person about duty. And duty is a funny word. It makes me laugh. It's ridiculous, but it does. And he just asked that of a ostensibly dignified adult. And they're answering because they don't know what else to do. If that's what you're asking, I do have a hard time believing that there really was a well thought out, sinister plot to bring people low this way. It's just, it really is. When you say locker room talk, this is not, I don't think this is really locker room talk either, but it's 12-year-old talk, 9-year-old talk in some cases, just because they wanted to see if a famous person who has a reputation to protect, ordinarily, would engage. And they do, because what else are they going to do? They can walk out, and then everybody in the audience says, oh, what a loser. All right, so back to the story. So that's why it's important to remember that Trump, in the period of his appearances, was deeply in the red, right? By the time he was a regular, he had blown it all in Atlantic City, run out on his vendors, left his imperious first wife, Ivana, for the commoner Marla Maples. That's unfair, I think, to both of them, all three of them. Earned the year-long silent treatment from his namesake's son, and reported a loss of nearly $1 billion. I didn't realize that they weren't speaking for a year. Even a businessman of cognitive impairment would have to sweat that one. The $1 billion loss, that is. His 1987 business advice memoir, The Art of the Deal, which briefly conferred valor on Trump's scattershot career, was now a distant memory. And now it's a Bible these days, apparently. Trump's gilded glory belonged to the suddenly despised 1980s. But Stern took Trump's calls and even had him into the studio. He gave Trump free airtime, as would cable news much later. And so Trump became dependent on the shock jock. He even admitted at times to being addicted to Stern's show, telling Stern during one episode that he was late to at least one really important meeting because he couldn't tear himself away from the broadcast. Trump's attention was evidently sliding off the dreary business of becoming solvent again. He was finding his calling as a carny. Stern, of course, welcomed Trump to the show like Willy Wonka with Augustus Gloop. But then he began the rapid-fire questions, shot with plenty of torque so as to elicit unwholesome revelations. Take, for example, the Stern question that led to Trump's assertion in 1997 that he could have gotten Princess Diana. No other cross-examiner could get away with this. Stern, out of nowhere, with zero reference, Why do people think it's egotistical of you to say you could have gotten with Lady Di? You could have gotten her, right? You could have nailed her. There it is. I think I could have. Trump responds uncertainly. But with Stern's nudging, he goes on to appraise the appearance of Diana, skin, height, etc., as if she were a horse, using the tone of sadistic connoisseurship he also used when talking about Machado. With this, Stern knows he's got his checkmate. A fool's mate, actually. Radio gold. Only a few sentences from Stern, and Trump has stooped to the show's level of discussing every woman, and a princess, no less, who had recently died tragically as though she were a stripper. Time for a victory lap, Stern style. Can I feel your ass, Donald? Can I feel your ass? Stern says to howls from his studio sidekicks. Check you for your wallet. Trump had indeed been pickpocketed of his dignity. The dignity theft, complete with Stern's whoops of alpha dog dominance, would have delighted Stern's regular listeners. After all, his mandate was, hour after hour, to induct new members into his notorious whack pack, the rotating parade of some 70 oddballs who regularly appeared on the show to be bullied by Stern, who gave them names like Wendy the Retard, Crackhead Bob, and Joe Cancer. He was a sweetheart, wasn't he? Here, Stern seems to have snagged another one, if only implicitly. Call him Donald the Douchebag. Okay, I will. The Whack Pack was a big deal in New York 2 decades ago, a part of the pushback against the sanitization of Times Square. Freak shows, neo-burlesque, and clown schools, oh my gosh, clown schools, that's the source of all these problems, were staging a comeback. Who knew? The Whack Pack, then, was a repertory company of regular guests whom Stern caricatured for their deformities, personality disorders, speech impediments, like I appear to have, a group so vulnerable and fame-hungry that they consented to be framed publicly as freaks. In this way, they prefigured unpaid performers on shows like The Bachelor, The Real Housewives, and cable news. That's a hell of a viewpoint. The members of the Whack Pack, however, were at least groomed to believe they were in on Stern's joke. The shrewder among them, Hank the Angry Drunken Dwarf, say, even were in on the joke, and managed to parlay Stern's brutal hazing into some legit showbiz moments. Trump, however, was not in on the joke. Listening now to the old Stern-Trump scenes, Trump clearly has none of Hank the Angry Drunken Dwarf's integrity. Wow. That's quite a statement. At one point in 1997, Trump was asked about a list he had made of 10 women he considered the world's most beautiful. Why would he make such a list? I don't know. How did it get back to Howard Stern that he did? I don't know. Maybe he offered it up. It seems the list was almost entirely opportunistic, though, a way for Trump to curry favor with women who might help him rehabilitate his career. Diane Sawyer, for example. But Stern didn't let the list gain for Trump a micron of respectability. Instead, he treated it as a lecherous artifact and made Trump squirm as he tried neither to disavow the women nor to join Stern in raunchy fantasies about them. Trump couldn't figure out a way out of this monkey trap, as when Stern asked him about Cindy Crawford. Her husband, this is what he has to say, her husband is a tenant. Trump Tower, I guess. He's a great guy, Trump said weakly. Her husband is doing beautifully at his restaurant. So Stern persisted, determined to return Trump to the sexism that sells. Did he want to bang this guy's wife or not? There was nothing left for Trump to do but chumpishly laugh along. After an appearance like this one, the audience is left with the impression that Trump is more outside the realm of polite society than ever, spending his workday pruriently ogling successful married women he doesn't stand a chance with. That's true. At last, Trump emerges in the Stern tapes as a kind of humorless George Hamilton figure, a lecherous has-been, measuring his march to the grave in New York Post mentions. Trump, on the Stern show, is, in fact, a big defender of the punchliner Hamilton, his tan twin, on the C-list. To keep douchebag Donald in character, Stern blows no end of noxious smoke, pushing Trump to preen pathetically and act the baller. But Trump never tells him off. Instead, he seems cravenly eager to please Stern, self-styled king of all media, whose unlikely charisma, unceasingly onanistic and anhedonic, using others only to spark his disgust or his libido, seemed infinitely bankable at the time. Wow, that's some paragraph itself. But by the way, do you recognize from the Howard Stern self-styled king of all media, where his friend Stewie Rah-Rah came up with his nickname, Stewie Rah-Rah, #1 king of all fun? I mean, it was a very Howard Stern-ish kind of reference. But maybe a whack pack wannabe shouldn't have commented on geopolitics. In 2002, calling into Stern's show on the first anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, Trump, who by then had published The Art of the Comeback, but was still 2 years away from The Apprentice, initially sounded self-assured. He started off plumping for, what else? The housing market as a sure thing, an antidote to the Enrons, the global crossings, that garbage, which of course largely financed his casino collapse. But okay, anyway, bored as he might have been, Stern smartly steered Trump back into douchebag mode with a nice assist from his deceptively gentle co-host, Robin Quivers, a nurse and one-time second lieutenant in the Air Force who also works with the United Nations to help exploited girls around the globe. As Quivers oohed and awed cartoonishly at Trump's BMOC routine, like a sweetheart with the fawns, she got him to reflect nauseatingly on how 9/11 compromised the view from his penthouse apartment. I have 2 windows that are focused on the building. You can't believe that after looking for 20 years at the World Trade Center, you can't believe they're not there. But Stern and Quivers in that interview were only softening Trump up for the rope-a-dope moment that had been so consequential in the 2016 election. Probing Trump's thoughts on 9/11, they got him to complain that we really don't know the enemy. Fair point, but it was the days of drumbeats. The Hawks were gunning for war in Iraq. Confused about that enemy, Trump suddenly seemed perilously close to teeing up an emasculated anti-war position. Stern saw an angle. "Are you for invading Iraq?" Stern asked. "Yeah, I guess so," Trump said. Without assenting, he would have been stuck making the case for diplomacy or police action, something consistent with an inchoate enemy, which is discourse way too subtle to interest Stern, or, as the world now knows, Trump. And I think that's actually kind of a strong point there. I don't. It certainly doesn't help. It certainly doesn't help Trump's case that he claims to have been against the Iraq War to simply say, yeah, I guess so. When it's put to him, are you for invading Iraq? I don't remember. I don't think I was listening at the time to. Well, I don't know. Certainly not regularly to Howard Stern at that point. Although I wasn't completely off of that habit entirely. It wasn't very convenient for me to listen. I wasn't commuting long enough to listen. It was much busier those days in the mornings. But anyway, I could very easily see that in the wake of the 9/11 attacks, Howard Stern being, if not thoroughly militant in searching for some way to strike back about the attacks in a military fashion. But he's got a weird relationship with the military, Howard Stern does. And it's, being militaristic was sort of part of the shtick, although he would very frequently in the middle of the shtick say, but as you know, well, he would either say, there's no way in hell I'd be doing this stuff, because as you know, sometimes he would say, I haven't been within 100 feet of the military or anyone in it, except for Robin, who used to be in the Air Force. But sometimes he would play on that as part of his shtick too, where he would then go on to pretend, particularly with people he thought had been in the military or were militaristic themselves, he would pretend that he had been in the military and that he had been a hero of some kind in Vietnam, and he would tell these ridiculous stories of not even fake heroism, but of actually usually vicious war crimes that he would then brag, that he had done in an attempt to convince somebody that he was in fact overly militaristic, whether that would be to disgust someone who is a pacifist or whether it was to form some kind of a fake bond with somebody who was themselves viciously militaristic. It's a very weird dynamic that he was pulling there. But I could certainly see post 9/11 that asking, are you in favor of the invasion of Iraq, when it was being sold everywhere as the obvious answer somehow to an attack by people who aren't Iraqi at all. You all remember, I'm pretty sure that this audience remembers very well what the atmosphere was like. If you had any questions about why we were invading Iraq, you were mocked, belittled, and as some sort of weak-kneed pacifist weirdo. And Trump didn't want to get caught there. And so all he could come up with is, yeah, I guess so. That might have been his most sophisticated foreign policy thought ever, actually. So on to the next section here. Weird. And I guess maybe this is some kind of explanation for why did the "can I feel your ass, Donald" line come up. There was another time that Trump submitted even more fully to Stern, tapping out, as they say in Ultimate Fighting, back into the discussion of Trump's list of beautiful women. Robin Quivers, the sidekick, remember, seemed to lose patience when lecherous talk of Trump's daughter Ivanka, who was then 19, started. I was surprised she wasn't on the list, Quivers said suddenly of Ivanka. In 1995, Quivers published a memoir called Quivers, A Life, in which she recounted having been a victim of sexual abuse by her father. Hoots at Quivers' audacity followed from the peanut gallery. That would be a front-page story, Trump said. By the way, just again, a pause here. Look at what's happening and look at the way this stuff is now emerging. She says, I'm surprised Ivanka's not on the list of the most beautiful women, and Trump is surprised that she's surprised. Would you like me to put her on my list? Stern said, incredulous. Maybe I'll date your daughter. So where's this all coming from? At the moment, Howard Stern. Astonishingly, Trump warmed to the idea. She has very good taste, Trump said. She'd probably find you very attractive. The daughter pimping moment met with audible shock, even on the original Shock Jock set. Quivers knew she had to keep Donald coming back, but you can hear the contrivance in her sign-off to him. Donald, I love you. You know that. Trump's run on the Howard Stern show came to a close right around 2004 when he met his next Svengali, Mark Burnett, the creator of The Apprentice. Trump was slated to play a powerful kingmaker by then, and I like that phrasing, to play a powerful kingmaker, and to dramatize both his setbacks and his ingenuity. Donald the douchebag didn't work in that context, so Burnett and Trump dreamed up what you might call the brutal tyrant, which worked so well that Trump took it to the political stage. Stern, for his part, has said he's supporting Clinton in the presidential election. I don't dislike Trump as a candidate, he told the Washington Post, but I'm absolutely enamored by Hillary. And I've told Donald that. Interesting. But Wendy the retard, a seemingly bright, if exceedingly accommodating woman who uses this moniker herself, spoke recently on the SiriusXM show about politics. Wendy is voting for Trump. Stern is ever the ringmaster, but his whack pack sticks together. Trump, however, still isn't in on the joke. And there's a correction appended at the bottom of this one. An earlier version of this article said Howard Stern had not said for whom he will vote for president. He has said he's supporting Hillary Clinton, is in fact absolutely enamored by Hillary, interestingly enough. So, I don't know. I found this actually to be a very insightful second look at what Donald Trump was saying and why and how he came to say it in these pivotal years that he spends on the Howard Stern show. Follow-up article in Billboard by Gil Kaufman, dated yesterday. Howard Stern weighs in on replaying all his Donald Trump interviews. I guess they've approached him about it on his SiriusXM channel. And he's got, I guess, they've got, because satellite radio, I guess, has infinite capacity for these things, he's got 2 or more, I don't even know how many, Sirius XM channels. One that actually broadcasts his show live, and then rebroadcasts the show all day long, sometimes with additional commentary, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's also a second Howard Stern channel that plays sort of like best of Howard Stern bits. And so, I mean, he could rerun all the Donald Trump tapes now that everyone has noticed, oh my God, some of the craziest stuff to come out of Donald Trump's mouth came on the Howard Stern show, and he's got tape of it all. Would you just replay all that stuff so we can hear it all again? He says, no, it would be, he considers it to be a betrayal of some kind. Howard Stern has been engaging in, quote, locker room talk for more than 35 years. But during his return to the air on Monday morning, yesterday, after a week off, and what a week to be off, the notorious shock jock claimed he's never heard anyone use the phrase uttered by frequent guest Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump in a now infamous hot mic moment with entertainment reporter Billy Bush. And he had some harsh words for reporters who are claiming to have discovered some damning interviews Trump did on Stern's show between 2002 and 2013. These conversations that I had with Donald Trump weren't done in private like the Billy Bush tapes. This was on the radio, said Sirius XM host Stern, lashing out at reporters who claim to have unearthed the chats. Okay, and that would be a bit of a stretch of a claim. I've discovered it, or I like it was somehow leaked to you. It was on the radio. That's true, but it took some time to go back and sit through them. Although it must have been entertaining. There were so many of them because it was entertaining at the time. Anyway, he goes on to say, why don't I play the tapes or play all the tapes? I have to tell you why. I feel Donald Trump did the show in an effort to be entertaining and have fun with us. And I feel like it would be a betrayal to any of our guests if I sat there and played them now where people are attacking him. I get the point. It is a different context. I don't know that he's going to lose access to guests or whatever, but I see his point. This was done, I think, in a spirit of, well, Trump trying to be entertaining. It's a very, as they say, douchebag-y way of being entertaining. That's true. And you can have a very different view of it now than you might have had of it at the time. But, yeah, the context is different. Did he say them? Yeah, he did. Should he have? No, he shouldn't have. Is replaying them now that he is trying to take on another role, and I mean, that's probably the best way of viewing all of it. The role of the comeback guy willing to take any kind of publicity and just be personable and chat with a radio host that he actually listens to, versus the guy who then refashions his image for The Apprentice, versus the guy who becomes the post-Apprentice character of brutal tyrant, that versus Republican presidential candidate. All very different phases of his life and different roles that he's playing. I mean, you hope that people aren't playing any roles at all. And when you got to know them and evaluate their fitness for the presidency, but okay. All I'm saying is there's a certain grain of salt with which I will take all of these statements. I still come to the conclusion that I find you horribly disgusting and unfit for the presidency, but there's that grain there. Stern, who said he's exhausted by the whole election cycle, did a 25-minute segment at the top of Monday morning's show, reacting to reporting last week about a number of his old interviews with Trump that painted the GOP candidate in a dim light. In the trove of tapes, the billionaire real estate mogul talked about inviting his first wife and mistress to go skiing in Aspen at the same time, bragged about his sex life and deeply troubled women and how they are always the best in bed, and playfully batted away questions about his alleged past infidelities. An avowed supporter of Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, Stern said he was honored that the chats are sparking controversy and conversation, saying it would be very easy to play all the Trump tapes in their entirety, but he argued that they weren't made in an effort to F someone over. We're having a good time. I fully knew what I was doing when I interviewed Trump, he said. I knew I had a guy who loved to talk about sex. I had a guy who loved to evaluate women on a scale from 1 to 10. These are avenues I went down because I knew it would entertain the audience. He said Trump called him at home last year when the unlikely GOP candidate began winning some primaries, and the radio talker tried to figure out what the end game was. I said, "Why are you doing this?" Stern recalled asking Trump. "Why would a guy with billions of dollars, maybe, run for president? Don't you know what they're going to do to you? Don't you know they're going to open up everything?" Stern then praised a CNN segment from last week that noted he has not tried to inject himself into the election by dredging up the tapes with the billionaire, whom he considers a friend. "I wasn't imagining that I would be in the middle of this election and literally so prominently mentioned," said Stern, who has hardly shied away from controversy and attention-seeking in the past for his probing interviews and studio stunts. "Quite frankly, as someone just said, I'm surprised they didn't find these earlier," he said. That's true. Adding that he hasn't spoken to Trump since just before the Republican convention this summer. There's nothing to find. As the guy said, they were right there in the open. Stern, who rarely grants interviews, claimed he's turning down 500 requests from a variety of publications seeking to chat with him about his Trump talks. After decades of pumping out thousands of hours of the most explicit locker room talk ever heard on radio, Stern also weighed in on that phrase, which Trump used in last week's second presidential debate to explain his vulgar comments on the now infamous Access Hollywood hot mic recording. But because he's still got a radio show to do, not before he played a Clinton-focused parody of the hot mic moment, as well as a series of explicit parody songs. "Do you think this is locker room talk?" asked Stern's longtime sidekick, Robin Quivers. "A lot of the show that I've been doing my entire life, radio show publicly, is an effort to do sort of locker room talk, to express all kinds of he gets to say that on Sirius XM, and not even care what anyone thinks," said Stern. "But this idea of locker room talk, all the times I've been around guys, and believe me, when I'm around guys, 85% of the time you're talking about the P word. But I have never been in a room when somebody has said, grab them that way, grab them by the P word," said Stern, repeating Trump's boast from the bus. "No one's ever advocated going that step where you get a little bit, hey, I'm going to invade someone's space. A lot of locker room banter is real kind of desperate talk. The reason it's in a locker room is because no one's proud of it." That's interesting. And, that's probably an accurate evaluation, too, although it's, I think, less revealing than the previous, the entirety of the previous article, which I think makes some really interesting and good points, and the previous portion of this article, wherein he explains, one, the astonishment that no one had found this stuff before, and two, why he isn't simply playing those things around the clock. Interesting. I think I can understand and sympathize with all of that. The view expressed in both of the articles. There's a lot of time, like I said, to spend on Howard Stern, but I think it puts some important context in here. It will not change your view of Donald Trump, and likely won't change your view of Howard Stern either. But if I read our audience right, it's the kind of background that I think everybody appreciates having. You might or might not want to share it with others, perhaps with other like-minded folks who might likewise find it interesting. But beyond that, like I said, it's probably not going to change a whole lot of minds about Trump or Stern. But I don't know. For a nuance-loving audience, I thought it was relatively appropriate. Okay, so just a few minutes left in the show. Really not much more time available to us than it will take to tell you what's coming up on the after show. But I just wanted to, we'll squeeze in one or two other quick stories. For instance, this one, I guess, since I've been administering such large doses of salt along with the various accusations of Russia's alleged activities in our elections this year, and sort of casting some doubt on it, I will let me share this from over at Daily Kos that I think is also a piece of the puzzle that we need. Let's see. Walter Einenkel's piece here. Some Republican senators' fundraising pages online were hacked, and they've been sending money to Russia for months. How do you like that? That's not alleging the complicity of Republicans, just rather that Russian hackers, and maybe not governmental hackers so much as just, hey, you're basic freelance criminal hackers who happen to be in Russia, skimming money off of NRSC fundraising. It's really a rather amazing story. For the last 6 months, the NRSC and their website, nrsc.org, collected campaign donations for Republican senators through their website that was infected with malware. According to Ars Technica, this malware collected all of the data from people donating to the site and also quietly skimmed off money from those cards. The storefront of the National Republican Senatorial Committee was one of about 5,900 e-commerce platforms recently found to be compromised by malicious skimming software, according to researcher and developer Willem de Groot. He said the NRSC site was infected from March 16th to October 5th by malware that sent the donor's credit card data to attacker-controlled domains. One of the addresses is hosted by dataflow.su, a service that provides so-called bulletproof hosting to money launderers, sellers of synthetic drugs, and stolen credit card data, and other providers of illicit wares or services. De Groot said it's not clear how many credit cards were compromised over the 6 months that the site was infected. Based on data from traffic estimates, the NRSC site received about 350,000 visits per month. Assuming 1% of those visits involved using a credit card, that would translate to 3,500 transactions a month, or about 21,000 transactions over the time the site was compromised. They're estimating what kind of value could that be to the hackers. They peg it at around $600,000 just for reselling the credit card information, and without even getting into how much money might actually have been skimmed from all this. If you donated or know someone who donated to the Senate Republicans in this last half year, you'll want to check on that credit card or bank statement, and find out. I doubt very much whether any of us did, and maybe we don't even know anybody who did. But very interesting. So a very different kind of allegation about Russia's involvement in hacking or in trying to influence the election. This is not necessarily trying to influence the election, it's just stealing money. Just interesting, certainly far more believable without much more than some of the other allegations, which require, I think, a more jaundiced eye. But I thought I would throw it in there anyway. All right, well, let's see. What's coming up next on the after show? Let's get to that. We can talk a little bit more about what's going to come up later in the week after that. Here we are, ready for Red Sky at Morning Tuesday on the after show. You've been warned, and here's what I'm warning you about. The FBI testified they warned, local law enforcement about the seditious Brady Bundy bunch, you see how I did that, planned to kidnap the Harney County Sheriff in exchange for a jailed comrade. Good plan. After receiving threats from other pro-Confederate group members, the founder of the South Carolina Secessionist Party comes out as a rainbow Confederate. And dispelling rumors that Hitler's home would be demolished, the Austrian government says instead it will be so heavily remodeled the neo-Nazis lurking about won't recognize it. I guess that's another approach to things. I hadn't thought about the decoration of Hitler's house, at least not in some time.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
On the last half of today's show, they'll visit with Chris Reeves, a.k.a. Tom Servo 433, on Kansas sex lies and fake harvests on videotape. All of that, plus the Connect, Unite, Act, Daily Kos community calendar, and more on the after show with Wink and Justice coming up next, right here on Networks Radio.